Fashion Forward, where we look into how fashion and society impact each other. I'm your host, Brittany Carl. Let's get started. The first time history noticed belts was during the Bronze Age. This era lasted from 33,000 BC to 12,000 BC. During this time, belts were mostly ropes and cords that were used to tie tunics together at the waist. Ancient Greece, ancient Egypt, and ancient Hebrew civilizations all used belts in order to show power, wealth, and status. Other ways that belts can show power today would be in martial arts. But another way of showing status, in boxing matches or wrestling matches, often the winner will be crowned with a belt. It wasn't until the Middle Ages that women started to wear belts as well. If you were a high-class noblewoman, it was often a chain belt that had a part leaning down. If you were a knight, you often wore the same kind of belt. If you were in a battle, you had one that usually had a sheath or something else, so you could stick a sword or a knife into it. If you were a commoner, it was usually a very simple leather belt that you could just hang things off of. Women with questionable reputations were literally prohibited from wearing belts. Slaves also were unable to wear belts. Military officers would often wear belts, either denoting rank or power, or to intimidate foes. One belt that was used in war times was called the baldric. Now this one was different than other belts. It didn't go around the waist or the hips, it actually went over the shoulder. This was usually used to carry a sword. During the Renaissance era, belts actually replaced bodices and corsets for women. This actually allowed women to move around more freely and be a lot more comfortable. During the 1800s, men's pants actually became higher waisted. Around this time, the suspenders were invented, and they were actually a lot more comfortable than belts with the higher waisted pants, so belts pretty much stopped being worn by men. Now, it wasn't until after World War I that men started to wear belts again. They had grown accustomed to wearing belts instead of suspenders, having fought in the war. During the 1930s, many women began to wear pants. This meant that more women were wearing belts. They were also wearing belts decoratively with their dresses. During the 40s, World War II hit, and so belts became very standard and very simple. The 50s brought in a lot of different fashions of belts, including the obi, which is a Japanese sash that was often worn with a kimono. Usually the belt buckle is a fashion statement. Men don't often have many accessories, but belts have always been one thing that men could use to express their own personal fashion taste. Utility belts have been around since ancient times and still are. You have plumbers, electricians, painters often using them, or Batman. Over time, belts have mostly been used to show status or wealth or power. Sometimes they're used for practical purposes, to hold weapons or other objects of need, and sometimes they're just fashion. Fashion and society are always moving forward, so check out next week's episode where I cover the history of hats.